Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lunch Break Science. I'm Ariel Johnson from the Leakey Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting human evolution research and sharing discoveries in programs like this. We'd like to thank the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation and Camilla and George Smith, whose generous support made this episode of Lunch Break Science possible. Here with us today is Leakey Foundation grant recipient Nicole Thompson González. Nicole, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Ariel. It's a real pleasure.
Nicole is joining us from New Mexico, where she is a National Institutes of Health Institutional Research and Career Development Award postdoctoral fellow at the University of New Mexico. I got it.
You got it. It's a long one.
Titles, I feel like they're specifically designed to be hard to say, but they're very impressive. So Nicole researches the evolution and development of social ties and the impact that they have on health and fitness. This research takes her to the Kakamega Forest in Kenya to study blue monkey social ties during development. So here's our little map with a beautiful little blue monkey.
There they are.
Yeah, and the Kabale National Park in Uganda to study the impact of social ties on stress and health of chimpanzees.
They are.
Yeah. Today, she discusses the relationship between social ties, health, and fitness. Before we get started, though, if you have any questions for Nicole during the episode, please be sure to submit them on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter into the chat or on our Leakey Foundation Live website. And Nicole will be answering those live during the episode. The earlier you get those questions in, the more likely she will be able to answer them. My first question for you is, what do social ties have to do with health and fitness?
It's a great question, and the short answer to that is a lot. But the long answer, first starting with just social living in general, that's just living in a social group is a really old solution to securing resources and finding safety in numbers from predators. But social ties, which are what I'm really interested in, are something a little bit more specific. And that's where individuals have social partner preferences that endure over time. And those social ties have the potential for tons of rewards. So like cooperation, reciprocity, tolerance, support. In social species, ties really give individuals an advantage along a number of different routes that are super important to fitness. And just for example, things like monopolizing resources and mates or increasing power and dominance, there's really good evidence for both of those pathways. Ties are also really valuable for accessing important information, like whether there's a predator nearby or for you and me, if a job is available. Just one basic but super important thing that ties can do is help maintain a secure and stable environment. So just maintaining that secure environment is incredibly important for many social species health and very much for humans. So that's really relevant for our cardiovascular, metabolic, and immunological function. So it's impossible, though, to figure out what ties and or health have to do with fitness without data from long-term studies.
Yeah, why are long-term field sites so important?
So in field biology, long-term field studies are really the backbone of understanding the biology and ecology of any kind of long-lived species. So you need data from individuals at all ages, in all seasons, and ideally in multiple environmental contexts to really understand what is this species, what are the many ways it lives, and what is important to its life. So basically what helps it survive and reproduce. To get at those data, you need to collect data for a really long time. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Leakey Foundation understands the incredible value of long-term field sites, and more and more now we're seeing, long-term primate research sites being impacted by gaps in funding and emergencies. So the Leakey Foundation created the Primate Research Fund as a lifeline for these programs. If you're interested in learning more about the Primate Research Fund, we've actually shared a link in the chat. Please check it out, especially if you feel like your research site is experiencing these kind of circumstances.
That's really incredible that you guys are setting that up, because I mean, it just takes so much work. It really takes a team to run these long-term sites. So here you can see this is the Kabale Chimpanzee Project team, some members of it. And this is out in the field, all the people who are collecting data on chimpanzees and have been, day in, day out, blood, sweat, and tears working for decades. Here, this is the Kakamega Monkey Project run by Marina Cords and her core team. Again, I mean, it's so much work. And on the flip side, I don't think that what we saw here was that when you have that much data coming in, it really takes a team effort to organize the data. So, I mean, we're bringing biological samples into the laboratory, feces and urine, and when you're doing that, for years and years and years, you really have to set up these organizational systems. So this is the KCP organizing party that we literally do whenever we have to bring in hundreds and hundreds of samples from the field.
That sounds actually kind of fun.
We turn it into a party. We make it fun. It's a real challenge to get those babies put away before they thaw. So you got to make it fun.
Absolutely. So last month, I called on my lunch break science friends to help us raise money for Women's History Month, and you all came through. You helped us raise over $13,000 towards research. This month, we have thanks to Anne and Jeff Magincolda and the Anna Gordon Getty Foundation, we have another quadruple match challenge. So the way this works, you can visit the link we shared in the chat, and your donation to the Primate Research Fund will be quadruple matched. So if you donate $25, that will have $100 of impact. If you donate $250, that'll have $1,000 of impact that will help maintain long-term research sites, protect vulnerable populations, and also help support the local staff members that are at the primate sites. So definitely, we shared a link in the chat. So we really just appreciate any help you can give us. Working at a long-term site and with long-term data is really important to the kind of research you do.
Yeah.
And we have not heard about blue monkeys before on Lunch Break Science. Can you tell us about them?
Well, that's such a shame. I'm glad I can fix that problem.
Yeah.
So, blue monkeys are a species with several subspecies, but they occur all across East Africa in several locations. Their social organization has adult females that are philopatric to their group. So basically they stay in the group that they were born in for their entire lives. Whereas males, juveniles, they end up dispersing right before they reach reproductive age. And the final membership of the group is a single resident male and multiple adult females and their dependent offspring and juveniles. So really adult females create the core social unit of a blue monkey group, similar to a lot of other cercopithecoid or old world monkey species like baboons, mangabeys, red-tailed monkeys, all that.
And what do blue monkey social interactions look like?
Well, their social interactions are really similar to a lot of other animals generally. So some of their friendly behavior includes basic things like physical contact and huddling. So that's super important for thermoregulation and also just senses of security. They'll often do that after they get into a fight or something like that. Similarly, a sense of bond building and reassurance is the behavior grooming. Super popular. Everybody's doing it, and that does a lot more than just clean fur. It has a lot more benefits than just hygiene. It really characterizes the strength of the ties that we tend to measure between individuals, and it predicts things like reciprocal exchanges and even coalition formation. So, and speaking of coalitions, that is one of the most interesting behaviors, in my opinion, of what adult female blue monkeys do. And that is they cooperatively defend their territory. So I think you'll be able to see it in this video. All right, so these magnificent shadows high up in the trees are blue monkey females who are defending their respective territories. So they're probably at the boundary of their home ranges right now. And if you can look closely and see, especially these females who are on the left, they're forming a line where, or a phalanx, where they're defending territory. But you can probably see this better on the ground, and I do. So, okay, every now and then, so most of the time blue monkeys are way up in the trees, but every now and then, on this instance, they came into the village where we live, and they're forming a phalanx again. So that's just a line. And you can see instances of that. This is a cooperative activity. You can see occasionally females looking behind them, looking behind themselves to check to see if their partners are there to support them. And so they're coordinating this effort. And the group on the right is just kicking the group on the left's butt, as they usually do. There are tons of more females in that group. And you can hear the chirps and the growls, which are popular noises during an IGE. And these are all adult females. I just want to be really clear. Most of the time, the resident male doesn't get involved in this. But you can see way in the back there, this juvenile female. Juvenile females are also heavily involved in this kind of territorial dispute. Oh, that was a trill. There you go. So yeah, some of their other friendly behavior, so that was cooperative behavior in the context of competition, but other really important friendly behavior is, I already said that the IGEs were my favorite, but I actually think that this is my favorite, and that's play. So this occurs almost primarily among juveniles, and in this species, it happens more, or males do it more than females do, interestingly. That was a great shot of a play face, but I think that it works better in live action, so why don't we show that? Okay, I promise as I was doing this focal follow, I was much further away, but they just kind of rough and tumbled until they were really close to me, and I was stuck in the scrub. So I just stayed very still and recorded this magnificent interaction. You can see these big mouths, that's a play face, so that's a friendly. And overall, you can tell it's not a fight because they're being slow, they're not giving each other a full bite, and it's repetitive and slow actions. And one interesting thing here, so play in general is thought to be some kind of training or preparation for novel experiences. And right now, this is quite a novel experience or a good training because these two animals are from different groups. So these two boys have crossed boundary lines, something that adult females would never do. And they're getting to know each other through play. And just last comment, that beeping that you heard at the end of that video, that is something that a lot of people who do primate field work will hear in their sleep because, because we wear our watches and we're taking a point sample, and that point sample is to say, what is our focal individual doing right now? And that's one way that we get at the duration of an event. So say I was following Dragon in that video, I would say at that point sample, Dragon playing with Seima. And I would record it as long as they kept playing to figure out how long he spends playing. So I hope that was clear.
Yeah. So you also study chimpanzees. How do chimpanzee social interactions compare to blue monkey social interactions?
So chimpanzees and blue monkeys, I mean, you know, they're similar in the sense that they're primates, of course, and you know, anthropoid primates, but their social organizations are super different, and it results in some pretty different behavior. So, okay, first, similarities. Grooming is still super important, but I got to point out in this video, it's not two females grooming each other. These are two males, and that's what you see more commonly in chimpanzees, and that's partly because they live in multi-male, multi-female groups, unlike single male, multi-female groups of blue monkeys. Males are living or staying in their natal groups, so they end up forming the majority of cooperative ties and doing the most territorial defense, whereas females don't. Okay, another similarity, they play. So playing still happens. Playing happens in, I mean, most animals, honestly. But differently, males and females don't really have the same, there's not as strong of a sex difference in play in chimpanzees as there is in blue monkeys, which is an interesting thing. So again, a difference is in blue monkeys, females are making all those cooperative ties, whereas female chimpanzees are usually solo. I know that's a vast oversimplification. They do a lot of really interesting things, but it's not uncommon to see an adult female chimpanzee hanging out without any other adults, but with her dependent and companion offspring, like you guys saw in that photo.
When we were planning this episode, one of the things I really loved is your passion for things that are epic. What was your trajectory to getting where you are now?
That makes me laugh, because I must have said that word a bunch of times because I sometimes lack a better adjective. So I just love like big things. I don't think I told you, but you know, like when I was a little kid, my favorite movies were like Alice in Wonderland and Fantasia and stuff. So like, but I was really obsessed with dinosaurs. So especially that like dinosaur vignette in Fantasia.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what kid doesn't love dinosaurs? But I was actually really dead set on being a paleontologist until I was maybe like 15. And then my love for the sciences kind of got mixed up with my love for the humanities. And I thought that what I thought I wanted to do was become a writer. And so I wanted to become a cultural anthropologist and travel the world and get some stories. I ended up not loving explanations that were given for behavior in cultural anthropology, and I got a whole lot more into evolutionary theory and biological explanations of behavior, and kind of seeing just having this sense of humans and me being on a continuum with all other life. So that was kind of that same like deep time feeling that I loved. So that's kind of how I ended up in this area of research, and I haven't left.
What were some of your first field experiences?
So my first fieldwork experience, I was really lucky to be able to go to a field ecology school for a month and change in Brazil, in the coastal rainforest just outside of Sao Paulo, while I was an undergrad. And that was really valuable because that was kind of the first time that I got out of the library and realized that like nature is chaotic and science doesn't come easy. But then my first experience with primates in the field was in Sulawesi, an island in Indonesia, where I worked for, I was a research assistant for Dr. Daphne Kerhoas, studying black-crested macaques. And I completely fell head over heels in love with fieldwork at that site. I loved running, jumping, climbing, chasing monkeys, poor monkeys through the forest. Yeah, we were good to them. Yeah, and so because I fell in love with fieldwork, I ended up continuing to pursue, primatology. And my next experience, I was able to do a master's at the University of Roehampton, where I worked at their field site in Nigeria with olive baboons. So yeah, I absolutely, I don't understand why, but I absolutely loved being able to watch an animal and then code its behavior into a digital format. That gives me great satisfaction. So that's what I was doing there. And probably like the greatest field experience that I've had was when I was controlling my own project and controlling the narrative and doing research in Kakamega Forest in Kenya on blue monkeys. And that project was graciously funded by the Leakey organization. So me being out there, couldn't have happened without you guys. And I don't know if you could notice, but I wasn't just staring at monkeys on the ground there. Blue monkeys are way higher, so that requires some rubbernecking.
Oof. One of your other passions is data analysis. How does data analysis fit in with your lab and fieldwork?
That's a great question. So, everyone has some amount of data analysis to do when you research, whether it's just formatting your data or actually doing the statistical modeling. Yeah. Love, hate doing both. So I find data analysis to be one of the most rewarding parts of science because it's where you get to take raw data and find the patterns in it. And I do all of my analyses in the programming language R, which through a roller coaster relationship I've come to love very much. So I could tell you more about it.
Yeah, so I mean, in addition to just being passionate about data analysis, you're also passionate about teaching and mentoring data
Yeah,
analysis and have an R workshop. Could you tell us more about the R workshop and the importance of mentorship in data analysis?
absolutely. So there are a couple of reasons I'm so enthusiastic about training people in data analysis. So first, for grad students, I've often found that grad students are pretty siloed in
Yeah.
their data analyses, and they're mostly figuring how to do things for themselves by themselves and kind of reinventing the wheel. So that was my experience. And I desperately want to help other research trainees to not have that experience because,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not necessary. But a second major reason that I'm passionate about teaching data analysis is because data literacy is power, and this goes way beyond anthropology or any science in academia. It's just a cultural thing. So as a part of my fellowship, I've had the opportunity to develop and implement this training course on introductory data analysis with R. And that's aimed at non-science majors and focuses on data sets that relate to social justice issues like gun crime, suicide. And basically my goal is that with research skills, people who experience problems can better be able to solve them or be part of the solution themselves, and engage with all these algorithms that run our lives.
We have shared a couple of links to information about your workshop and a blog you wrote about using data to empower. So definitely be sure to check those out if you're interested in learning more about her workshops. I am very excited to dig deeper into your research and hear more about the connections you found. Before we get started with Nicole's talk, though, if you're enjoying this episode and are interested in seeing more, be sure to subscribe to the Leakey Foundation's YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook or Twitter to be sure to get reminders of upcoming episodes. Now let's turn the virtual floor over to Nicole and hear more about her research.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's get right into it. So as Ariel and I were talking about, the ability of sociality to shape fitness is really profound, and it's widespread across social animals. And it's become exploring this link has become a big area of research in the last few decades. And in primatology, this was primarily started with the work of Joan Silk, Gene Altman, Robert Sapolsky, and Susan Alberts. So got to give credit to them. And I pretty much fell in love with exploring these ideas or the ideas surrounding this link when I was studying for a master's at Roehampton University in 2010 and 2011. And there I worked with Yulia Lehman, and she introduced me and my cohort to social networks and their ability to influence fitness and physiology. And this is also where I started to understand the distinction about social ties, which I already said are those non-random preferential interactions with group members. And so fast forward a few years, and I've thought a lot about all the different ways or pathways that sociality or social ties lead to fitness. And these are now evident in a number of social animals. Or social mammals, though animals broadly probably the same. But each of these pathways are essentially based on a problem or a challenge that a given individual faces that a social tie can help solve. None of them are mutually exclusive. Actually, several are probably working at once, and I'm definitely not going to go through all of these. I just wanted to highlight within the broader framework what I focus on, and that's this pathway called reducing risk and allostatic load. So allostatic load is basically, it's a fancy name. It's the outcome of a process called allostasis, and really it's similar to several other ideas like stress, dysregulation, and really health in general. So this is primarily a physiological pathway that highlights how social ties can help buffer or mitigate stressors in the environment. So my research tends to inhabit this nexus, looking at the relationship between social ties, health, physiology. And then when I can, fitness. Like I said, it's hard to get at actual fitness outcomes if it's not long-term data. So of course, these causal arrows run both ways. You got to take that into consideration. Nothing is simple. And the last aspect of this nexus that's important to me is acknowledging that this nexus is dynamic over the life course. So like I said, ties are only important or beneficial based on the challenges they help overcome. And those challenges are different at different life stages. So I usually, for the sake of simplicity, break down life stages into these 3 categories, though there are arguably many more according to the species. And that's infancy, juvenility, and adulthood, where infancy is characterized by dependence on parental care for survival. Juveniles are no longer dependent on parental care, but they're still sexually immature, and adults are fully mature. And so, as we've talked about already, I've had the privilege of observing so many different primate species in the wild, but I'm gonna talk to you guys, focus on these 2, which Ariel introduced already, and that's the blue monkey and eastern chimpanzees. Giving much credit and homage to the amazing teams that sustain these sites over the long term. And also the people who I work with primarily on these projects, and that was Marina Cords at the Kakamega Monkey Project, and Melissa Emery Thompson, director of the Kabale Chimpanzee Project. So I'll start off talking about this cercopithecoid primate, the blue monkey, that again lives in single male, multi-female groups. And the population I studied for my dissertation lives in this little pocket of Western Kenya. And I'm gonna start off with a basic question, which was whether or not social ties matter for fitness. So this is the starting point. If we don't have these type of correlational studies, then examining the pathways that sociality influences fitness doesn't really make any sense. So for this study, we looked at survival in particular as a proxy for fitness of adult females. And so using that long-term data, we could find that adult females with strong and consistent social ties had the highest survival. And on the flip side, those that had strong but inconsistent ties had the lowest. So you could actually get away fine with having weak ties. They just needed to be inconsistent. Anyway, there's more detail there. But basically, what this indicated to us is that investment in social ties bears some kind of cost to females, because it seems that without consistently strong partners, the opportunity for any kind of reciprocity or stability is lost. And interestingly, that effect is cumulative. So it becomes stronger the longer amount of time that your partners are unstable. So then I wanted to examine some of the physiological and health-related pathways, but I wanted to do that in juveniles. Now, why juveniles? In part because juveniles are understudied. They get a bad rap. They're so fun to watch, though. More importantly, because their life stage presumably entails unique and strong challenges like physical growth and navigating a new social group. So first, I wanted to verify what exactly the major challenges or stressors are for juveniles, and also whether social ties or sociality can buffer those stressors. So what we found is that low energy balance is a major stressor for juveniles, and we measured energy balance using a popular marker called urinary C-peptide of insulin, and the stress response we measured via fecal glucocorticoids. So adding some sociality in there, surprisingly, social aspects of competition, like maternal dominant status and experienced aggression, were not stressors. And then in terms of affiliative behavior, interestingly, playing did buffer the stress of low energy balance, while grooming actually did the opposite. So the more grooming a juvenile did actually increased the stress response beyond the effects of energy balance. So what that suggests is that female juveniles who are doing the brunt of that grooming are potentially paying initiation costs to social integration, because that grooming is in part to facilitate these development of long-term allies in their natal group. So the last big question I had for blue monkeys was how social strategies or profiles develop. And so we asked do they perpetuate across generations, looking at moms and infants and juveniles' behavior. And specifically, what we wanted to find out is, are there maternal effects on sociality? And what we found is that it's definitely not a one-to-one transmission, but there's a definite suggestion that mother social tendencies set up the next generation's tendencies. So infants' experiences with their mothers in their first year of life was a very strong predictor of their later social behavior as juveniles with group members and specifically with peers, so other juveniles. And that maternal effect was sex-specific. So male responses to maternal interactions were different from females. All right, so let's move on to chimpanzees. For chimpanzees, I have primarily been working on individuals in the adult stage of life and actually really focusing on late adulthood during the period of senescence or physiological decline. And again, these chimpanzees are from the Kanyawara community in the Kabale National Forest, Uganda. So for our first question basically has to do with examining physiological correlates, but ascertaining whether certain physiological processes are even relevant to a given species. So in chimpanzees, we wanted to know if oxidative damage, which is basically another type of stress or measure of allostatic load, whether it increases with acute trauma like injuries, and more importantly, whether damage increases or accumulates with age. And we found that there's no whole body accumulation with age. We're using urinary markers to get at this. But we do see that markers of inflammation and oxidative damage do increase in individuals preceding death. So some indication there. And then our social question, so we've done these in separate studies to start off with. Our social question, we want to know, how does social integration change with the challenges of aging? So again, social ties solving problems, subject to constraints. Senescence reduces physical activity, it reduces physical function. So we want to know, how is sociality changing at the same time? And so what we found here was that males and females, they age differently in the social world. So males, they decreased their social effort with age, but they actually maintained high centrality. So even though they put less effort into socializing, they still were able to maintain really high integration, maintaining connections with important and well-integrated partners. Females, on the other hand, they also decreased in social effort, but this resulted in overall greater seclusion with age. And interestingly, females appear to be replacing cooperative or affiliative ties with high rank. So as they increase in rank with age, they're decreasing in sociality. And so the million-dollar question, how does sociality shape physiological aging in chimpanzees? I'll have to leave you hanging because that's the next frontier. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much. We have a question. I feel like it would be good to answer right now, which is, please define centrality.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. So that term comes from social network analysis. And so it's not talking about being central in geographic space. It's talking about, I wish I could just throw up a picture of a network, but it's talking about how central you are within the network of partners. So if you picture, I won't even go there. So basically, an individual increases in centrality when it either has many social partners or it has social partners that themselves have many social partners. So basically, it increases access to things like information. On the flip side, it could have a cost of increasing exposure to diseases. Honestly, a sociogram really helps. And I'm sorry that I didn't have that at hand to throw that up for you, but I hope that helps.
Well, we will be taking questions from the audience very shortly. If you have not gotten your question into the chat, please be sure to do so now. But before we get to our audience questions, Nicole, you have some future directions for some projects you're working on. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about those projects?
Yeah, thanks. So my future directions have to do with looking at sociality more at a community level and evaluating the impacts on health from social and competitive exclusion. And that's the umbrella theme for two pretty different projects. So first, I'm working with some researchers on UNM's medical campus, Deborah McKenzie and Johnny Lewis. And there we're looking at the effects of environmental metal pollutants on inflammation and immune dysregulation in pregnant Navajo women. This is a really important research question or area to investigate, because the Navajo people are heavily exposed to environmental metals because the United States government disproportionately mined for heavy metals near Native American reservations and then did little to nothing to clean up the mines when they closed them. So it's been an ongoing problem for a couple generations now. My other project, which is quite different, but in a way looks at a similar social phenomenon, is evaluating whether competitive exclusion is driving the small and unhealthy population of blue monkeys, not in Kakamega, but now at the Ngogo site, Ngogo Forest in the Kabale National Forest, Uganda. And for this project, I'm collaborating with Michelle Brown at UC Santa Barbara, who is the head director of the Ngogo Monkey Project. Oh, did I miss out on Mallory's art?
No, yeah, let's go back and take a look at that amazing artwork.
Yeah, sorry, I got carried away and I didn't explain here. So Mallory Katauki is a Zuni Pueblo artist who does, I'm so glad we can zoom in. She does this this is the most amazing SciComm in my opinion. She's an artist and she wants to communicate the findings from the Navajo, the research on the Navajo that we do to the Navajo. And this, what you're seeing right now is a T cell, and the receptors and reactions that are happening at its surface are represented by animals of strength and power in Navajo culture. And she has been incredibly prolific, especially during COVID, to communicate what is the biological process of infection and how your body defends itself immunologically. So I recommend you check out her art.
Yeah, we shared some links in the chat, so definitely check it out. I've seen some of her other work; it's really quite lovely. But let's now take some questions from the audience. We have our first question comes from H. Could you speak a little about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected your research and the research of your colleagues?
So absolutely. I have been incredibly lucky, and I don't, I've never stopped acknowledging it, but I've been incredibly privileged to be able to work on this long-term data, mining for questions that haven't been asked or answered yet. So personally, my research hasn't been severely affected. I haven't been able to be in the lab doing some of these assays at some points. I know that several people haven't, my colleagues haven't been able to come into the lab, and it's limited them in that way. I mean, and that's not even getting into my colleagues with children. So that's a whole new ballgame. Again, I don't have kids, so it's easier for me. But I also really empathize and commiserate with a lot of students who I know who have delayed their fieldwork or had to really reshape their entire research plans. So I give them full kudos for all of their creativity and their patience. And I feel like I want to give them a hug to say, don't stress, it's going to be great. This is what life does.
Yeah, it's definitely it's kind of heartbreaking. Yeah.
In a lot of ways, yeah, absolutely. Especially those who have lost people or are suffering from the long-term effects. So
yeah,
I respect.
Well, let's take another question from the audience. Alice Corning asks, what is the biggest question you want to answer?
The biggest question that I want to answer.
It's an epic question.
That is an epic question. Oh, man. I mean, I wish that I could like put a biomonitor inside of an animal and just see how their body is responding to everything and gather tons and tons more data than I do. I think whatever my big question would be would have to do with intergenerational transmission of trauma, or programming of physiological functions, especially related to the immune system. So something like that.
Okay, let's take another question from our audience. What does the sociality what effects does sociality have on conflict between and within groups?
That is such a good question. That is the heart of so much socio-ecological theory that has been being developed and refined for the last 30 plus, 40, definitely 40 years in primatology. And could you keep that question up? Because I want to just make sure. I won't drone on too long about it, but the answer is a ton. And actually, I think that the way that it's commonly considered is that conflict that you're highlighting is an outcome of the competition that exists for access to mates and resources that exists both within and between groups. And that competition brings into play kind of a landscape where different social strategies can be more or less beneficial in accessing those resources or those mates. So, based on the distribution of those resources, you could have different outcomes in terms of what kinds of cooperative ties best serve you. That was really abstract, but if you're new to this, I would recommend looking at work by Andreas Koenig, who's really well summarized the history of the thought behind modern socio-ecological models. I could probably still use an update. But thanks for that question.
We have one last question from our audience. What about intergenerational trauma, epigenetics involved in that?
Yeah, intergenerational trauma. I mean, I'm fascinated with that. So trauma, it doesn't have to be trauma per se, although trauma is interesting to study, not only because that kind of research can actually help people, but also because that's where you would potentially find a strong signal. But basically intergenerational transmission of experience. So it doesn't necessarily have to be negative or, fitness reducing or health reducing experience. And absolutely, epigenetics are completely involved with that. And for the last 10 years, I've regretted that I've never developed DNA analyses or any genetics in my toolkit. So I wonder now that I'm an old dog if I could ever learn new tricks or if I can just collaborate with someone who really knows their stuff. So that'd be great.
Well, my last question for you is, do you have any advice for those watching who are interested in pursuing primate behavior study as a career?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I have a couple of tips. Well, the first thing that occurs to me is that I know that some of these field experiences, now it's becoming more popular that they are funded and paid assistantships. That's wonderful. And I encourage any graduate students who are already in the thick of it to include those assistant stipends in their grant proposals. I think that also looks favorably on you. But if you're not able, if you can't find a funded assistantship position, on one of the many sites, starting off just with, you can go to zoos. You can do research assistant positions at zoos, which don't require travel and housing. How do you find these positions? Well, some of that, it can be hard for introverts out there. Believe it or not, I am an introvert. And I think that, well, first off, one thing that most people are concerned about that holds them back from reaching out is feeling like they're going to look dumb.
Yeah. That
someone is going to make fun of them for asking a question that's ridiculous or, is inappropriate. And I say, as hard as it is, don't be afraid of looking dumb. Actually, when that experience happens, if anyone makes you feel dumb, let that be a litmus test for that individual, because that's not someone who's going to be your best mentor. So you'll find your spot. Bring your enthusiasm, bring your inquisitiveness, and a good mentor is what you want, and a good mentor won't make you feel dumb.
Well, that was excellent advice, Nicole. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
We're done already. That was
so
fast.
I know, it flew by.
It was fun, guys. All right. It was great to be with you.
Well, next week on Lunch Break Science, we meet primatologists Andrea Baden and Stacy Teacott for a special Earth Day episode of Lunch Break Science. They'll be discussing lemur ecology and conservation, so be sure not to miss that. It's going to be a great episode. And stay tuned after the episode for more information about Leakey Foundation programs. Thank you all for taking a break from your day and feeding your brain with the Leakey Foundation. Until next time, stay hungry for knowledge.
Stay hungry.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Lunch Break Science is brought to you by the Leakey Foundation and made possible by the generous support of the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation and Camilla and George Smith. Visit us at leakeyfoundation.org to learn more about the Leakey Foundation, today's guest scientists, and how you can help support human evolution research and educational programs like Lunch Break Science. Right now, all donations to the Primate Research Fund will be matched by generous donors, meaning your impact will be quadrupled. Miss an episode of Lunch Break Science? Catch up on past episodes and browse our library of Leakey Foundation lectures on our YouTube channel. Still hungry for science and can't wait till our next episode? Check out the Leakey Foundation's award-winning podcast, Origin Stories, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the Leakey Foundation's YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or sign up for our newsletter to be the first to hear about exciting upcoming episodes and programs, as well as groundbreaking discoveries in human evolution research.